We have reviewed finance plans for all kinds of varied film projects with wide budget ranges, including TV content and films, and we have created some slates of these wide ranges. And we're going to dive into that much more. However, I would like to take a look at the next step in determining how we can combine the slates and the funds we have to raise, meaning our equity, and how we can make it work in connection to a library. So when we establish our library, we have to think about how to go forward, because the library itself, the content itself that's being established with the equity investment, presents a value that is something we can sell at the end. And that is often seen as an exit strategy for investors. So they want us to take a look at the content once it's generated and not just present to them what happens with the first one window, which is often what we do. Most of finance plans include the first licensing, but they also want to look at, well, what happens afterwards? What is my continued revenue with the library, and what is its value at the end? How much is generated from all the different distribution aspects over the years with the title? And that represents an exit strategy for them, because the content library continues to generate revenues and therefore is of value to someone who buys it. And equity investors who don't want to stick around for the next 20 years will look at the library as an exit strategy when it's sold. So we're going to look at a library of 10 films. I think I put that together. Was it 10? I think so. And with an equity investment of 35%, we're going to look at the first run. The US rights are sold at 35%, international at 75%, ancillary rights at 5%. So it's kind of what we have done with our finance plans in the past. The second run is going to be less. Here now, we see the US at 18%, international at 38%, and ancillary at 3.5%. In the last run, the third one that we're looking at, it goes even further down. The US is now at 9%, international are now at 19%, and ancillary at 1.8%. We keep royalties going, which are generated in connection with the licensing runs, and basically telling us what is the value going forward, and that has to do directly with how much was generated by each film. So the way we look at projecting libraries is we're going to look at our 6 films per year. So we have film 1, a thriller, $6.5 million in budget. We are financing with our fund 35% of that. So that's $2,275,000. So this movie is going to generate 35% from the US during the first run. 35% of 6.5 million is $2,275,000. It will generate 75% from the international market in the first run for the licensing revenues. That is $4,875,000. And the ancillary rights, we're looking at 5%, that is $325,000. So during the first run, our first movie or thriller for $6.5 million is generating $7,475,000. So that's the first run that we're looking at here. And it's not there actually. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So then our second movie, a romantic comedy for $8 million. Again, we're assuming we're going to invest 35% in equity. And this can go up and down a little bit. We're just generalizing it here because we need to project what the library will look like. So we have to go with general assumptions that also match our finance criteria. So that's what we're doing. It doesn't mean that we can't have a movie where potentially we're only investing 30% or potentially we are investing 50% because it's a lower budgeted movie, for example. So all of this is fine as long as it's kind of leveling out in the end to match our investment criteria. So for the projection of the library, we're going to generalize the percentages to make it easier for the investors to follow and also to have a general understanding what would happen in the first run, the second run, and the third run. So again, this next movie is a romantic comedy for $8 million. We're financing it again with 35% of the budget with equity. And then the US is generating 35% in run one, international 75%, and ancillary 5%. So altogether with this $8 million movie, we're making $9.2 million in the first run. Film 3 is an Academy Award-winning drama at $3,750,000. And here we are also generating for this movie in the end, in the first run, $4,312,500. Film 4 is an action movie at $7.5 million, and we are generating in the first run $8,625,000. Film 6, our thriller, is going to be $8.5 million, and we're generating $9,775,000. So this is what we're generating in the first year, and then the second year we continue right through here, because this is not a cash flow plan. This is not a slate where we are looking at what are the finance sources, how does every movie perform for the first run. This is an overview of what the library, after we produce all the movies, could look like. So that's how we go straight into 2026 here with our movie, the sci-fi, $12 million sci-fi. We are again financing 35% of the budget at $4.2 million. We get 35% from the US at $4.2 million. We get 75% from international, $9 million. We get ancillary, $600,000. So we're generating $13.8 million with this sci-fi. Film 8 is another award-winning drama for $5 million. We're generating $5,750,000 with this one from the first run. We have then Film 9, an elevated horror movie at $3 million. We're generating $3,450,000. Then we have a holiday movie at $550,000. We're generating $632,500 in the first run. Then we have an action thriller at $9 million. We're generating, what are we generating here? The total is not there. We're going to find it out in a minute. I'm going to check that. And then we have a destination comedy at $500,000. We're generating $575,000. So the first run could be anywhere from 3 years to 5 years, sometimes even 8 years, depending on who you're selling it to. But for the price levels that we have shared here, it should not exceed 5 years. So this is kind of the prices that we have. Now, if we are selling the first run for a longer period, which you could absolutely do, could be 8 years, could be 10 years, could be 15 years, the license fees go up because they need to allow for the fact that we can make money additionally, as we will see in the next slide, from a second run and from a third run. So basically, when we give away the movie for a longer time, we need to elevate the pricing to include what we would be making in the second run and the third run. And that's really the key when we give away a movie for longer periods. So when we look at our second run, first of all, with our first run, we generated $74,807,500, $74,807,500, and that is on a production slate that was a production volume of 65,050,000. So that means that, and also in an equity investment of 22,767,500. So that means we do have about 115% generated in the first run in connection to our budget. Obviously, in connection to our equity investment, this percentage goes up. But in regards to what the budget would reflect with the first licensing run, that's where we are. The percentage is really something we just look at for library values. It's not the financial percentage, because when we put the finance plan together, the budget is actually not 100%. It's not $65 million. It's less in the sense that 20% of that at minimum will be covered by non-recoupable finance sources. And that will make, obviously, the library on a financial point of view much more interesting and much more valuable in regards to revenues. But for the valuation just on the surface, we don't necessarily look at what were the non-recoupable finance sources, how was it all put together. We're looking at how much did we have to invest, what is the production volume in their entirety, and how much is the movie on its own generating with the library, because the library stands on its own and reflective only of the movie itself and the value of the movie in years and years and years to come. And at that point, it doesn't really matter anymore, was there a tax incentive involved or what's what. What matters is how did the movie perform in regards to revenues, and how does it continue to perform in regards to its library value. So let's take a look at run 2. You see here that our thriller, film 1, is going to now make 18% of the budget from the US in run 2, 38% from international, and 3.5% from ancillary rights. So altogether, this $6.5 million movie is going to make $3,818,750. So that's about half the budget that the movie will generate again in run 2. Now, run 2 could be after 3 years, could be after 4, after 5, and usually is about a 3-year time frame, sometimes 2, but it could likely not be more than 5. If it is more than that, this license fee would have to go up. So the percentages I just mentioned to you, they would have to be elevated, because we're now going then into the time frame that would be allocated to run 3, which we're going to look at in a minute. So a romantic comedy of $8 million generates $4.7 million for the second run, and our award-winning drama is generating $2,203,125. Our action movie of $7.5 million generates $4,406,250 from the second run. The rom-com that we made for $750 generates $440,625. The action thriller film 5, or film 6 actually, is generating $4,993,750. The sci-fi movie that we made for $12 million is generating another $7,050,000 in run 2. The award-winning drama that we made for $5 million is generating another $2.9 million, approximately $2,937,500. The elevated horror in the second run is generating $1,762,500. Our holiday movie makes another $328,125. The $9 million action movie makes another $5 million, approximately $5,287,500. And our destination romantic comedy for $500,000 makes another $293,750. So these are, as I said, generated values that are averaged out. And so it could very well be that each of those movies performs slightly different, and then the second run would also look different. But right now what happens is it's about half the budget generated in the second run, between 50 to 60% is generated in the second run again. So we made 115% of the budget in the first run. We're making another about 60% in the second run. And that's important to generate here, because that's another $38,216,875 that we're getting from the second run, after we got $74,807,500 from the first run on our production slate of about $65 million, for which we spent about $22 million in equity. So that's kind of the relation you have to look at when you look at the library valuation. So here we are in our third run. So that would be about, I would say, 6 to 10 years after the first two runs have completed. That's when you would look at starting the third run. And that could also be a 2-year run, a 3-year run, up to 5 years approximately. So here we are dropping down even more. Now we get, for our $6.5 million, 9% of the budget from the US. We get 19% approximately from the international, and about 1.8% for ancillary rights. So this is now the third run values that we're looking at, which will be about 30% of the budget for the third run. So again, you can look at about 115, 120% on the number one run, on first run. You can look about 50 to 60% on run 2, and you're looking about at 30% of the budget during run 3. These specifications and these numbers are very much driven by, of course, what kind of movie is it? How well did it sell? What was the budget range? What was the genre? Who was the actor? I mean, there are 1,000, as you know, with performances driven factors that will drive the value of any given movie for any given revenue. But in this case, the job again is to create an average, to create an overview that can help with an exit strategy if we sell the library. So for the second run, we're looking at about 29%, roughly 30% on our 12 films. So altogether, I'm not going to go through every single movie again. We are generating here $19,108,438 in run 3. So if we're adding this up, we have again 19 million roughly from run 3, 38 million roughly from run 2, and 74 million roughly, or 75 million roughly for run 1. This is where we are right now with our $65 million production slate. So there is a value that we look at which is called royalties, and that has to do with the fact that we as producers, get additional royalties that are kind of estimating what could happen after run 3. Normally they're estimated at about 25%. This is for a library that performed okay, that performed on average. So we would not, design another 15 runs. We're just going to combine it as a royalty in the end, which resembles run 4, run 5, run 6, whatever it could be. And so that is what we kind of put in as a, call it a placeholder if you want. So for our 12 movies, we're looking at about $33 million in the royalty value. So that's precisely 33 million, 33 and 203, lots of threes. But that's something that basically replaces what we would look at if we would run the library further, and manage it all the way into the future. It's usually not something that is done because, again, unless you're a studio. Studios do this because they hold on to their movies 50, 60 years, which is what their business is. But as an independent, you will find at some point you're going to sell the library. So if we're looking at a library here that's between 10 and 15 years old titles, this is where we're looking into the future. That is about the time when they normally get sold. Sometimes they get sold earlier, but sometimes that's kind of the time we're looking at it. So the royalty value would be a guiding factor for the buyer to say, well, what could I be generating after I buy this? So they would look at, okay, I can generate another $33 million. Interesting. So maybe I'll offer Jeanette, 30 million, or maybe I'll offer her 20 million. Maybe she'll take it because I'll make 33 million, so I'll make money. So this is kind of the negotiation point that we look at when we sell libraries to see where are we in the world of licensing right now with our library, how has it performed, and what is it worth going forward. And the royalties kind of tell us what it would be worth going forward. So that's why that number plays a role. So let's take a look at the summary here. We had our $65 million slate. We invested about $23 million and we generated $166,166,16. No, It's 165,166 and 16. Sorry, I overlooked my glasses. So we're looking at a performance if I calculated this correctly here, I'm going to check real quick. Yeah, we're looking at a performance of about 250% of the production volume. So if I would look at my production volume of 65 million and I would run it against the $165 million, I would look at about 250% in performance, which is a good performance. It's an okay performance. I mean, if you would have like a James Bond in there or something that blows up, let's say our elevated horror blows up and it becomes a franchise, it becomes the next Scream or whatever, a Saw franchise, whatever it could be, this number would go up drastically. And you have that sometimes. You have libraries where you have one or two titles that are evergreen titles that people want to watch, like a holiday movie or I don't know, some kind of an evergreen movie if you want. Those movies, those kind of titles will elevate the library quite significantly because they are watched forever and people like them. And they're also used for an IP that would generate a franchisable title. And that is also valued in a library for a piece of content. So we have not looked at that for this library. We're just basically assuming it's a general library with these movies that we're making. But I want you to keep in mind that these outliers, one of the 12 could be an outlier that makes an amazing amount of money. Like one of the romantic comedies could be A Big Fat Greek Wedding. That would elevate the library tremendously and would shoot it through the roof in regards to what the value would be and how much we could sell it for. So here's the summary. I squeezed it all in one sheet. Obviously, in the case study, you have an Excel sheet to see the summary and the Excel components much more clearer. But for purposes here, I wanted to summarize it on one slide so you can see, aha, we have a slate of 12 movies, $65 million production volume, about $23 million investment, and we're making 165 million with these movies over the next 10 to 15 years. That's the summary that you look at here in order to see how will I manage these movies on the long run. As always, let me know if you have any questions about this. And again, I have to, and I can't stress this enough, tell you that libraries and valuations really very much vary. Their valuation very much varies in regards to what movies are in the library, how much were they sold for in the first run, the second run, the third run, and are there any outliers in there or not, positive and negative. So it is really something where the devil is in the detail. However, for the business plan, we need to have something that is averaged out. And for that, this kind of instrument helps an investor understand what value they're actually buying into when they give us $23 million.